there! Welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're finally going to be talking about the newest album from JID, God Does Like Ugly. I can argue that after the Forever Story, it effectively opened the door for JID for full mainstream crossover, give or take a couple questionable features along the way. He had a lot of options ahead of him, especially in a streaming environment where you don't exactly have to play the larger radio game. Sure, it took until the Ceiling Challenge for his solo star to properly ascend, but there was a time a couple of years ago I thought he could be the next Kendrick Lamar, who then spent 2024 proving that he wasn't going anywhere. And you know, I kept expecting JID to jump into the fight, especially when J. Cole was first linked to that beef before he utterly humiliated himself. I mean, JID certainly seemed hungry enough to assert his presence. He was a good enough rapper to do it, which is why the fact that this album is now coming out in the summer of 2025 feels a little odd to me. He couldn't have foreseen that this year would be utterly oversaturated with excellent hip-hop, even some crossing into the mainstream, although he's certainly trying to prime the pump with a prequel EP of B-sides that I'm not really going to be formally including in this review. To mention it quickly, flows are pretty great. I like most of the production. Probably most impressive on Animals Part 1, where Eminem does what he does, but also not enough to excuse Lil Yachty continuing to embarrass himself as per usual. But really, the songs do not feel essential when discussing God Does Like Ugly. And the title intrigued me. The immediate comparison I made was to the 2002 emo rap classic God Loves Ugly by Atmosphere, though that does feel kind of coincidental at best, and I was curious what JID would try. Back to the streets and serve the bass, get more political or conceptual, keep trying to make mainstream plays. Where was all this going? And the answer, kind of everywhere, which has left us with an album that's doing a lot and a lot of it well, but also feels like a step away from realizing some of the potential in which JID has been showcasing. It's absolutely very good, frequently great, but I also really don't think it comes together nearly as effectively as it should. And at least for the first third of the album, as the pitch-shifted samples creak and strain around the crushing bass rumble and the textured trap skitters, where the stark contrast with soaring gospel samples is brutally intentional and reaches an early potent fusion with the stormy, piano-driven soul of glory, well, you might be perplexed by that. I don't need to restate that JID's deft lyricism can skate across flows and intonations with a technical flair that mimics the high wire dance of ascending through the streets within the rap game, and the bargains one might make in order to keep climbing, especially with his brother going back to prison, and the Forever Story not quite moving as much culturally as it really should have. All of that is awesome, but it's also not inherently surprising or new for him. He explored a lot of those themes on the Forever Story, especially how cyclical these paths often are. But by the time we get Clipse on the grisly, guitar-driven knock of Community, their own culpability and example snaps into focus. Street-level stories told to canonize the projects and the people therein, but often interwoven with selling drugs or weapons within them. And while he might make the money and get out, he doesn't want to see people left behind, displaced, or forgotten by gentrification either. JID's always been acutely aware of some of the systemic factors and how much the struggle to survive then feeds back into that same ecosystem of disenfranchisement, which is why he remembers the carjackings that he may or may not have participated in as a teenager, only to see his car broken into on the chalky bass rumble of G's when he was at a Falcons game. And if this album had stayed in that territory, especially feeding into the genuinely spellbinding Spanish guitars and sandy percussion of VCRs with Vince Staples, with its numerical sequences and its exhausted deconstruction of the damage that late capitalism has wrought, I was convinced that JID was aiming for something truly special, take that next step, and then the album swerves. And we head inside from the street-level violence to something more intimate, R&B inflected, damn near club-ready mainstream cuts. And after Sierra and Earth Gang mostly hold the loose, bouncy pattern of skate together, the momentum of the album just evaporates. Now, this is the segment of the project that's received the most criticism and backlash, where I would guess JID was trying to show off more crossover range, but in terms of sequencing and theme and even some of his singing, it feels like a major misstep. From where all the vocals are pitched down against the minimalist scratching of the first half of What We On, to the creaking, limp, lumbering strings of Wholeheartedly with Ty Dolla $ign in black, the dramatic loss of tempo, it's glaring. Now, in theory, I get what he's trying. Following the underlying tension and cycles that taint everyone coming off the streets, JID is then taking it to more intimate relationships, where he would hope to find a stabilizing force where his success hasn't exactly been that for him yet, only for said relationships to be rife with that same frustrating inconsistency. It culminates in No Boo, with Jessie Reyez of all people. I'll give her credit, she's become a much more expressive singer since those god-awful Eminem features in the late 2010s, and she complements the fluttery piano and guitar melodies pretty well, even if I don't care for all the pitched up samples in the song. But the track also feels like JID's attempt at a We Cry Together, but the song never really goes to a truly vulnerable or disquieting place in the same way his street level material can. Mostly because there's this rejection of JID showing any of that vulnerability in the canon of the song, talking about a recent heartbreak, but you don't want to bring that up on a date. But you know what, that is revealing. Circling back to the album's title, it could have been the moment where JID highlights the human frailties, contradictions, and failures that are ugly, but might still be embraced by a higher power regardless. That we ourselves should embrace and give grace to each other in these moments, especially given the dualism and cycles that dominate this project, and could maybe be transcended. But as the album enters its final segment and really struggles to recapture its momentum, where I'm not sure the distorted, almost horror-inspired street banger on McAfee was the proper way to do it, peppered by a lot of existential angst and crises of faith, and also mistaking David for Daniel in The Lion's Den on the third verse of the extended multi-part of Blue, with the late album highlight K-Word highlighting the personified karmic backlash that's set for everyone who can't free themselves of those cycles amidst the smoky orchestral backdrop behind the trap beat. It's really cinematic, and how many people hate seeing any consequences for their actions, ugliness be damned. Well, the ending has JID just reflecting on his come-up and presence in the rap game, where he's doing it all for the fans, but he's addicted to the game. He's not really trying to break the cycle. It doesn't feel like enough to pull all this together. Not only does it feel like the underpowered version of what he did already in 2007 on the Forever Story, but it's kind of in direct contradiction with the whole thematic arc, especially in the jovial tone of Gratitude, and it leaves me back with a lot of the same thoughts I had way back with DiCaprio too. JID will often approach bigger ideas, point out contradictions, graze them effectively, and moments strike poignancy. But there's this guarded poise that keeps him from challenging in the follow-through, where I think the audience at this point would probably welcome it. Ironically, if I'm to take the album art's context of those granted masks in order to dance, ignorant of the silhouettes and shadows around them, I'm kind of reminded of a bit of the iconography of Tyler the Creator's Chromacopia, and I also remember just how far Slug went on God Loves Ugly over 20 years ago. But there's this cruel irony that in an album where the mask could or should have come off in order to break the cycle, it feels like I know less about JID after this than I did from the starkly detailed family adventures of the Forever Story. Well, except around some of the thoughts he has with God, I gotta wonder if JID's reticence to really challenging those bigger ideas or systems comes from the beliefs that they can't really be challenged, similar to religion. You just have to come and live with them. And the album again is more about finding grace and peace of mind amidst it all. It would not be surprising, given features from Vince Staples or Clipse on this album and similar themes in their work, but again, it's met with every passing line that promises a little more. And that's what makes God Does Like Ugly a very good, in moments great, but deeply frustrating album. The production just nails that subtle discordance between the beauty and the ugliness, the textured soul and the rattling trap grit. JID is an excellent rapper with real ambition edition. The guest rappers nearly all deliver. And in about half of this project, in some form, it's legit excellent. But it's weighed down by that commercial R&B swerve that won't show the vulnerability nor has the momentum to hold its own. Personal note, I don't think JID's the best singer. And quite frankly, I still think we're being teased with him really stretching himself as an artist. In a weaker year, I'd be inclined to give a lot of that a pass anyway. Just 2025 is not that year. And while I still think it's absolutely worth the recommendation, if God indeed likes ugly, we could have seen a lot more of it, especially if we're looking for transcendence, break the cycle at that crux point. All I'm saying. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. I'll freely admit that this was a bit of a frustrating one to get to. It's a long album. It took a while to really digest. And yeah, I do like it. I like it a lot. And again, the first third of this album is amazing, but yeah, it just kind of fell off a little for me, and it's not as great as it should be. But hey, leave your comments down there below. Anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if y'all want to get involved in helping support the channel, get albums onto my schedule, or just yell at me on my Discord, link to my Patreon and YouTube memberships are right over here. Once again, don't feel obligated, tough times, the options available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.